Welcome back to Littell's All. In our last episode, the battle lines were drawn. 30 days in a $12 million estate, trapped with a toxic sister who wants me gone. I survived the first morning, securing my place at my late father's dining table. But I knew Eleanor. She was never going to play by the rules. If she couldn't legally throw me out, she was going to make me wish I had never returned. The psychological warfare was about to begin. The 30-day inheritance trap, Part 2, Chapter 3. The sabotage the Vance estate was built in the late 1800s. It was a beautiful architectural masterpiece, but it was always cold. The stone walls seemed to absorb the heat, leaving a constant, damp chill in the air. By day 3, that chill became my permanent companion. It started with the small things, the invisible needles designed to prick at my sanity. I was in the shower, the hot water, washing away the exhaustion of another sleepless night, when the pipes groaned. Suddenly, the water turned freezing cold. It wasn't a gradual shift, it was instant, bone-chilling ice water. I gasped, stepping back, shivering uncontrollably. When I got out and checked the basement later that day, the main water heater valve hadn't just malfunctioned, it had been purposefully shut off. The next morning, I went to the kitchen. I had bought my own expensive groceries to avoid eating their food. Premium coffee, organic cuts of meat, imported cheeses. I opened the heavy refrigerator door, only to find the shelves completely empty. I looked down. My groceries were in the trash can, covered in coffee grounds and rotting eggshells. As I stood there, staring at the ruined food, Eleanor and Richard walked into the kitchen. Eleanor was wearing a pristine cashmere sweater, her face a mask of perfectly faked innocence. "Oh, Elias," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I'm so sorry. I told the cleaning staff to throw out anything that was expired. They must have made a mistake. You know how hard it is to find good help these days." She smiled, a sickening, triumphant little smile. She wanted me to snap. She wanted me to scream, to break a plate, to throw a punch. Because the moment I lost my temper, the moment I used physical violence or caused a disturbance, the inheritance was theirs. I didn't break. I looked at her, calmly reached into the cabinet, pulled out a dry piece of bread and took a bite. "It's fine, Eleanor," I said, chewing slowly. "I'm not very hungry anyway." But the ultimate test came on day 7. In the middle of a freezing night, the power to the east wing my wing was completely cut. The rest of the house was glowing with light, but my rooms were plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. The heating vents stopped working. The temperature in my room dropped below 40 degrees. They expected me to come banging on their door, begging for blankets, or screaming in frustration. Instead, I put on my heavy winter coat, sat in the dark velvet armchair by the window, and watched the moon rise over the frozen lawn. I sat in the freezing dark for 10 hours. I refused to give them the satisfaction of a single complaint. I was a ghost in my own home, biding my time. By day 12, my silence was driving Eleanor insane. She realized that depriving me of comfort wasn't going to work, so she escalated. She decided to use the law. Enter Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable was our family maid. She had worked for my father for 20 years. When I was a boy, crying in my room because my father was too busy to acknowledge my existence, Mrs. Gable was the one who brought me warm milk. I trusted her. That was my first mistake. I noticed she wouldn't look me in the eye anymore. When she cleaned my room, her hands trembled. She was sweating. One afternoon, I was supposed to be out in the garden reading, but it started to rain, so I came back inside early. As I silently walked down the heavily carpeted hallway toward my bedroom, I saw her. Mrs. Gable was hurriedly backing out of my room, nervously looking over her shoulder. I hid behind the heavy oak pillar and watched her rush down the stairs. My heart pounded. I went into my room and locked the door. I searched everything, the bed, the closet, the drawers, nothing. Then I opened my leather suitcase tucked under the bed. There it was, buried beneath my winter sweaters. Our late mother's diamond necklace, a piece of jewelry worth over $200,000. The plan was brilliantly evil, a theft conviction. If I was arrested for stealing from the estate, it would be a direct violation of the moral clause in my father's will. I would be automatically disqualified. Eleanor had bribed the one person I thought I could trust, paying her to plant the necklace and then, inevitably, make an anonymous call to the police. Panic flared in my chest for a second, but then it was replaced by a dark, cold clarity. I didn't confront Mrs. Gable. I didn't yell. I took a pair of silk gloves, carefully picked up the glowing diamond necklace, and slipped it into my pocket. Waited until Eleanor and Richard were having their afternoon tea in the conservatory. I crept into their master bedroom. It was lavish, reeking of expensive perfume and arrogance. I walked over to Richard's corner of the room. He had a custom-made, imported leather golf bag leaning against the wall. I unzipped the side pocket, dropped the diamond necklace inside, zipped it back up, and walked out. 2 hours later, the heavy iron gates of the estate buzzed open. Red and blue lights flashed against the Gothic stone walls of the mansion. 2 police cruisers parked directly at the front door. Eleanor met them in the foyer, putting on a masterful performance of a distressed woman. "Officers, thank God you're here," she cried, clutching her pearls. "My mother's heirloom, it's gone. We suspect it's my estranged brother. He's staying in the East Wing." The officers looked at me. I stood calmly on the grand staircase, hands in my pockets. "I have nothing to hide, officers," I said smoothly. "Please search my room." They did. They tore my room apart. They found absolutely nothing. Eleanor's smug expression began to crack. "Check his suitcase again," she shrieked. "It has to be there." "Ma'am, the room is clean," the lead officer said, his tone growing impatient. "But since we are investigating a grand larceny, we need to search the entire premises, including your quarters." "Excuse me?" Richard puffed out his chest, his face turning red. "That is absurd. We called you. It's standard procedure, sir." I leaned against the banister and watched the beautiful disaster unfold. 10 minutes later, an officer walked down the stairs, holding a plastic evidence bag. Inside, the diamonds sparkled under the chandelier. "We found this hidden in a golf bag in the master bedroom," the officer announced. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's jaw dropped. The color completely drained from Eleanor's face. She looked like a ghost. She stammered, pointing at me with a trembling finger. He put it there. He set us up." "Sir, ma'am," the officer said, his voice stern, stepping toward Richard. "I'm going to need you both to come down to the station to answer some questions about filing a false police report and attempted fraud." Watching Richard sweat and stutter in front of the officers, watching Eleanor lose her perfect, arrogant composure, it was the highlight of my week. Eleanor's dirty tricks had failed spectacularly. She had tried to dig a grave for me, but she only managed to push her husband into it. But playing defense wasn't going to win me this war. I realized that my father's estate held darker secrets than just a stolen necklace. It was time to stop surviving. It was time to start hunting. What secrets were Eleanor and Richard hiding in the shadows of this house? Find out in part 3. If you love real-life karma, subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a comment below. I am Lay, and karma is